The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Cybersecurity Planning, a holistic approach presented by our sponsor, Heffernan. We're so happy you can join us. My name is Amanda Ramatar, and I will be your moderator today, and I will also be monitoring questions you may have during the session. Before we open up the session, let's review a couple of key items. All of the webinar materials we discuss can be found at the URL currently showing on your screen. I will be sharing this URL in a follow-up email, so don't feel like you need to write it down right now. If you have trouble with your internet connection during the webinar, we recommend leaving the presentation and logging back in. We do not control the audio. Your devices control the audio. So if you have audio difficulties, try adjusting the volume settings on your device. If a telephone line goes dead during the call, hang up and call back again to the same number. If all lines go dead, watch the on-screen chat box for an alternative call-in number. Feel free to ask questions or provide feedback by using the chat box or questions box during the webinar. If you are using a tablet, you may need to tap on the screen for the options bar to appear. Then you can select the appropriate option. We may not respond immediately, but we will work your questions or feedback into the presentation. If we can't get to your comment or question during the session, we will be online afterwards to respond, or we may follow up in an email if we run completely out of time. You may also email us at moderator@aspenrmg.com for up to 48 hours after the webinar. This will be a 1-hour presentation. Questions and comments are very much encouraged throughout, and the presenters will be answering questions at the end. And lastly, we have a number of upcoming webinars covering a variety of topics, including those listed at the Heffernan website. In addition, we offer the mandatory Preventing Harassment training in English 3 times a year. With that, let's begin today's webinar, Cybersecurity Planning, a Holistic Approach. Our presenter today is Eric Reed. Mr. Reed began his IT career as a software developer programming punch cards on an IBM 370. Mr. Reed moved into network operations and later as a network and security architect provided the IT design and project management for many of the world's largest hotel casinos. After which he provided IT audit services and managed Sarbanes-Oxley testing for a leading pharma. In 2005, Mr. Reed moved to United Healthcare, where he spent the next 10 years as a director of audit, risk management, and compliance. Since that time, he has consulted for companies including Honda North America, the Walt Disney Company, and Warner Brothers, Warner Media. Thank you for being with us today, Eric. Hi, Eric, you there?
Yes, thank you very much. My apologies. Thank you for the very nice introduction. Greatly appreciate it. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Today we're going to be talking about the whole idea of using holistic methods. So when we look at risk environment, we want to talk about what is the holistic approach. Well, when I speak holistic, I'm really talking about a situation or an instance where the parts are intimately interconnected and really understood only as a part of the whole. A lot of times we don't look at our risk and our systems that way. But when we treat this entire risk, we're getting a better solution, we're getting a more thorough solution than when we just treat certain symptoms. The holistic approach really, it really requires an accurate overview of the risk landscape. It gives you this. And it's a governing principle that first of all requires accurate risk reporting. So the holistic approach, again, we're looking at things as a whole. We're looking at how we can better understand the risk landscape. And that means not only raising some issues as higher risks and being more concerned, but also seeing that some of the issues we first discussed or first thought about may not have been that high a risk, and we can move them down a little bit from our priority of testing and remediation. So it's all very important. And the whole goal here is so that companies can focus their defenses on the most likely and threatening cyber risk scenarios. Now, this is extremely important. I've talked before about threat modeling. And this is kind of taking a threat modeling approach in that a threat model is something you build based on what your company and how your company operates and what a company sells or produces, and determining where are the threats to our IT environment. Where's the most likely threats? Who's trying to threaten us? Who's trying to take away our business? Who's trying to to steal from us? And obviously you have nation states, you have professional cyber hackers. We're also looking at a lot of targeted areas what you can take a look at. So this whole idea is about achieving a balance between effective resilience and efficient operations, and again, being cost effective. That balance is extremely important. You want to be resilient. You want to be able to handle things. But the more controls we put in, the less efficient operations sometimes have to be. So as we talk about this holistic approach, I want to throw another term at you, and that's the term of workflow. Too many times we get involved with a assessment or a risk issue, a threat, and we kind of forget to make sure we understand it, that we are able to resolve it in a way that doesn't negatively impact operations. I'm currently working on a segregation of duties issue on a huge Oracle system. And the segregation of duties is huge. But what we have to do is look at, are all segregation of duties the same? If you have a minor issue, which doesn't really cause a problem, but it's an annoyance, or you could have a significant issue. Here's where we have to look at all of our risks that way. So why do we do holistic? Again, almost every system in an IT environment, the systems are connected. It can be through direct interfaces where one machine directly talks to another one, workflow processes or functions which roll up into, I call it 10Q and 10K reports from the Security and Exchange Commission, 10K and 10Q. And that's because right now I'm doing a lot of Sarbanes-Oxley work, SOX work. So based on that, I was kind of overreaching. I shouldn't have said the 10Q and 10K. We should say roll up into any security reports. And that's what we really are looking at. Traditionally, we've looked at each system individually. Here's the system, what are the risks, how can we remediate it, and fine. But our risks today are not like they used to be. It used to be I had a perimeter, I had a half dozen servers or maybe more inside my perimeter. If I could control my perimeter, I controlled the world. But now we have cloud applications. We have third-party vendors doing a lot of work. So all that data and all that processing is no longer within your data center, within your perimeter. Your perimeter is now in different cloud environments and other third-party companies. So it changes how we look at things. And we try to look at things in two ways. What is the workflow? So there's a workflow example. It's just a very generic one, but the whole idea is this. I start with something and somebody has to touch something. Someone enters a document, it goes through a process, it may be split up, it has to go to adjudication, so it goes to another person. The entire workflow of start to stop, how the process works. Now, that's very important to know. That's how business staffs their employees and determines where they're going to hire based on their workflow requirements. But we look at data flow can look vastly different than the workflow. And the data flow, we can be sending things to third parties that we're not even aware of. In California, we have CCPA, which is a California privacy law. And part of it is you have to have an opt-out and do certain things. But you have to identify who these people are. You can't just let someone opt out or look at someone else's data. So many companies are using a credit reporting agency and shunting data over to them to figure out if this person is really who they say they are, and then comes back. That would be in the data flow example, but it probably wouldn't be in the workflow because it would just be a stub for someone to confirm identity. But the point is that data flow, if it's not expected, we should know where it is. Why are these important? Is because without both the workflow and the data flow, we can't really understand what the application is doing. and how it's doing it and how it's interacting with other systems throughout your environment. And that's the whole idea of the holistic approach. We want to see everything as a whole. We still have to do a lot of work on individual systems, but it all has to roll up into what does that really mean to the cybersecurity protections, or what does that how does that impact our risk? Holistic security is hard. Don't get me wrong. This is not easy. If we start over here in on the lower left, let me see, learning growth perspective. We have internal perspective, customer perspective, and financial. Very important to know these things. For example, you'll see on customer perspective, they don't care about budget or implementation or security policies. They want performance. Financial, the risk is, are we protecting our risks? But if we start with number one, the number one thing is management commitment, lower left. Without a top-down management commitment, you cannot succeed in any of this work. And I'm sure all of you are very, very aware of that. From that goes up to budget. Budget is very important. And the IS security administrator competence, if you look in the center bottom part. I won't go through the whole thing, but how many have thought about, okay, we have this great protection system, this great security system. Are our administrators competent to actually run it and be aware of it? Well, that's a thing. And then on the lowest, on the learning and growth perspective, if we look at security awareness, we're going to talk about that a little bit. Security awareness is one of your biggest bang for the buck things you can do in any of this in this entire chart. But when we talk holistic, we have to look at all of this again at the individual system as well as the entire enterprise view. So I'll let the first question be read.
All right, so a little bit of the question gets cut off, so I'm going to read off the whole thing to everyone, okay? So why should we look into a holistic approach for cybersecurity? A, risk can be the best measured on unique systems. B, the holistic approach is based specifically on workflow. C, treating the entire risk environment rather than reacting to specific risk symptoms creates better value while increasing your security footprint. D, the holistic approach is based specifically on data flow. We usually like to wait until we get about 70% of our attendees having answered. So there's no wrong answers to everyone. You feel free to take a guess if you have no idea. So we got about 50% voted. And so we're just going to wait a little bit longer, maybe another few seconds, and then we'll close out the polling question. And I will read off the results. Okay. Okay, so 7% said risk can be best measured on unique systems. 10% said the holistic approach is based specifically on workflow. 74% said treating the entire risk environment rather than reacting to specific risk symptoms creates better value while increasing your security footprint. And 10% said the holistic approach is based specifically on data flow. And the correct answer is C. Treating the entire risk environment rather than reacting to specific risk symptoms creates better value while increasing your security footprint.
Thank you very much for reading those through. I just want to talk about this for a moment. Risk can be best measured in unique systems. Well, it can be easiest measured, but not best, because the unique systems don't give you that entire view of your organization. On B and D, it's kind of, I was trying to fool you, it's based on both the workflow and the data flow. So it's not specifically on workflow or data flow. So all those had a part of being right, but C was the best answer. There we go. Okay, now we're going to talk about the areas about how we go about the holistic review. And I'm going to talk about cybersecurity first. Okay, Cybersecurity First is an organization. They have a really detailed process on designing secure systems. So obviously, there's no just out of the box, this is secure. So this group has come up with some basic foundational propositions And regarding what qualities of the system really are needed to contribute to cybersecurity. And there's 10 main principles. Now, before any further, I have no relationship with Cybersecurity First. I'm impressed with their documentation. I don't know them individually, and I'm stealing their information to share with you because I think it's valuable. But please don't think there's any relationship between me or this organization or I believe your organization with Cybersecurity First. So there's actually 10 domains, and it talks about each domain, but what do these mean? And we don't really have the time, to go through it. I did something there, and I need to come back. There we go. And there on the actual presentation, there's a Word document. And I was going to open that up, but that doesn't work with this presentation. I should have known that. Just know that there is, if you click the Word document, and if there's a problem with the Word document, let our folks know, and we'll make sure it becomes available. But all it does is it really details what each of these mean and how they impact your overall risk. Really some good ideas here, and I'm unable to bring it up now. My apologies, but take a look at that. I'm sure it's going to answer a lot of your questions about exactly how you go about this. So we'll go right to 2, company culture, tone at the top. I talked about this a few minutes ago. Management has to buy in. If management doesn't buy in on any of this, you can only manage up so much. Now, tone at the top becomes very important, especially if you're in a regulatory environment, because it is used to define the management and the board of directors' leadership and commitment. Without that, it's very difficult to move forward. It was popularized because of the accounting scandals from Enron and WorldCom, and we can go on and on. Tone at the top is a significant impact on a company's cultural environment and corporate values. And these corporate values and the corporate culture is huge. Lately I've worked with a number of smaller companies doing around $1.1, $1.5 billion, privately held, wanting to go public. And what's really interesting is they got to where they are by moving quick and turning on a dime, and we're going to change everything tomorrow. Well, when you're in a corporate environment, when you're a publicly held company, there's certain things that you really have to slow down with. You have to think about, you have to prepare. And it's very difficult for some companies to get past that. But those are the things we have to know walking in. And then if you look at Sarbanes-Oxley, for example, it requires top-down management. It demands you demonstrate top-down management. That becomes very important. So that's the company culture. Obviously, you've heard this 1,000 times, tone at the top, but it still remains important. People risk management. Now, we've heard about all this, but let's talk about what I think people risk management or people risk is. It's the risk that people do not follow organization procedures, practices, or rules, thus deviating from expected behavior in a way that could damage the business's performance and reputation. Okay, yeah, we've seen this in fraud, we've seen bad business decisions, but most of all, and I'll tell you, I worked at 10 years at United Healthcare, and in one of the most regulated environments in the world, and I did a tremendous amount of audit on systems. And I found dozens of times where system administrators had gone around processes. Now, the heartening thing is never once did I ever see that where they ever did it for their own personal gain. What I saw is that the process they were given didn't work, and they were just trying to make it work. And that's as we came in, we were able to help them and help them understand how maybe we can come up with a better solution. So people risk is not just people doing bad things. It's a lot of times trying to do the right thing, but doing it badly. So the 3 ways you really have to look at people risk. One is if the processes are transparent, it's easier for them to understand. It's easier for us to see if the processes are being abused. Enforce segregation of duties. And this I'm going to talk about real quick, ability versus authority. Now, segregation of duties, and we'll come back to that in a minute. Segregation of duties is all about protecting important or high-risk items. So Let's say I'm an accountant and I say, I'm going to create a new business. Then I'm going to have I'm going to accept an invoice from that business. And you know what? I have pay authority. So I'm going to pay that business. So now I've just set up 25 businesses. I've got them all being paid to me. I'm not doing anything except collecting checks. Well, I'm not saying any of the accountants in any of your organizations would ever do such a thing. But if they have the ability to, the risk sits there. And nobody likes that huge open risk. So when we talk about segregation of duties, we talk about segregating things so it takes at least 2 people to perform a higher risk function, such as a person that would create a new business account and maybe even accept some of the documentation from them, probably wouldn't be the person to authorize payment. You've got to keep some things separated. And there's different levels of segregation all up and down the spectrum of risk. So not only do I see this as an important area, I also we also have to take a risk-based approach. There's too much out there. We can't boil the ocean. We can't fix everything today. But what we can do is take a risk-based approach and take our higher risk items and look at those. And that goes right into our talk about openness about risk. What I see companies do over and over is they bring in consultants, they do the best darn job, and they're putting everything together and nothing's working. Their entire risk program and their cybersecurity program is well managed. It's well understood by the main stakeholders. But you know what? Nobody out there really knew what they were doing. They didn't know why they were doing it. I found that when people push back, the best weapon you can ever have is, this is why we're doing this. We're trying to protect you from these risks. Segregation of duties. We don't want you to be in a situation where you have to explain why you did both of these things. We want to separate it out so it saves us all from having to have that other uncomfortable discussion sometime in the future. But people risk is always going to be there. I have seen an instance where on a major cloud organization, it was a huge data holding company for many major companies, Fortune 500s. And they had a main data center in the cloud in one region, a second one in a different region, and a third in the third region. Regions to cloud are not only just areas, they're geographical areas of the world, so that if the entire internet goes down in one region or the building burns down, it's going to be backed up in the other 2 regions so that you can't lose your data. Well, this employee decided that this company let go their top 3 engineers and let them go in a very angry way. And then these engineers came back and they didn't bother actually taking away their access rights. So these people, after being let go and no longer employees for months, still had access rights. So they went into one of the cloud environments and they erased everybody's data. And they went in the second region because remember, they had the highest rights you could have. And they erased all the data there, and the same in the third region. So this company is struggling to stay in business now because they're not trusted. It's people management, and what this company failed to do is follow through on its processes on the termination side. But all those things feed in. And so when we look at where that risk of terminations on time and management and segregation of duties, that all helps resolve and lower some of the risks. So we have our second question.
Why is tone at the top important? A, tone at the top is a key metric. B, tone at the top indicates management's dedication to cybersecurity. C, tone at the top sounds good, but it's just another management technique to look good. D, tone at the top is determined by quarterly earnings. We got about 23% up. We're growing. Wow, I couldn't believe your example there, Eric. That was pretty intense for a company to have to go through.
Yeah, I said I've seen some really interesting, I say interesting today, but really terrifying things out there.
Heartbreaking. Wow. But yeah, I mean, big mistake. Lesson learned. Awesome. So we're at about 60%. So I think I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share the results with everyone. All right, so it looks like we had two questions that people kind of honed in on. 15% said tone at the top is a key metric, and 85% said tone at the top indicates management's dedication to cybersecurity, and 85% of you were correct. So the answer was B.
Nice job, everybody. I have to just make this comment. If you're a cynic, I could tell you if you're a cynic because you automatically go to C. And then D, unfortunately, that's truer than it should be at times. But no, the real answer is it's all about management's dedication to cybersecurity. Without that, you can't move forward successfully. Do this now. Integration. Okay, we talked about 1, 2, and 3. With the last 3 was people risk management. So 4 is integration, tools, and business plans. This is kind of a pet peeve I have, and I see this all the time. I walk into a company and they have every tool known to man. They've got packet sniffers and they've got 5 different devices that check to see what's in their hard drive, and they've got all these great tools, but they don't use them. And mostly they don't even know how to use them, but it makes them feel good because they have all these tools. So companies are using sophisticated technologies, and they're trying to protect these critical business assets. But without the integration with the tools into the business plan, are we just throwing away our money on tools? This is interesting. McKinsey and Company, again, March 2019, but I don't think it's been that big of a change. Trust is generally lacking in many organizations' cybersecurity initiatives, in part because of competing agendas. I see that all the time too. I bet you do too. It's when Bob wants this for this reason, and Jake wants this, and they're virtually the same thing with 90% overlap. But at 10%, they both must have their own tool. So the question is when we come in and look at these tools, for what is the use case and what business plan do they fit into? I teach a lot of audit classes, IT audit classes, and the 2 things I always ask people, and the first is, what does an auditor do? And of course, the answer is nothing. An auditor reviews, they read, and they make an opinion. If they create something, if they implement something, they can no longer be the auditor because you can't audit your own work. But I got lost there. My apologies. Let's go back to this. We're senior business leaders on the board. This is kind of important. Cybersecurity gets really important when there's a problem, when there's a hack. But try to get money when you've been really successful for a while. So we're kind of victims of our own success from time to time. Everything out there is still a risk. So we've got to be able to better message what we're doing. So this is to me the most important slide of the whole thing. If security is going to be taken serious, we've got to align the business plan and cybersecurity objectives and tools and all those other processes. Keep in mind, our biggest problem with cybersecurity, it's seen to be a cost center with no revenue implications. I am a big believer in saying, no, cybersecurity isn't about stopping bad guys. Cybersecurity is about revenue protection. We're protecting downtime. We're protecting theft. We're protecting stolen revenue. I think if we start talking that direction, then the people in the C-suite may just start listening to us a little bit more. And again, revenue protection, I think, is a huge term. I'm trying to get people to start thinking in those ways because it puts us back in play. We're part of the company again. We're not just this group on the outside stopping cyber hackers. We're performing revenue protection, okay? Again, revenue protection, we're doing the same thing we're doing now, but we're just trying to explain why we're doing it. So automation, we talk about automation. These are, again, these main areas. And automation's huge. Automation's so important, but if you have an immature process, it should not be automated. You will just automate the errors you already have. Before you automate something, it should be reviewed to ensure another automated process doesn't duplicate the process, should be mature, should be determined to be effective, should be reviewed to understand what the limitations are. You should be able to demonstrate value, and it should support revenue protection. If you can get there, then you should not only create significant cost savings, but get a much, much better process. From an audit point of view, we love to see automated systems because human systems, you're always going to have 2 to 3.5% human system interaction errors. Typing in wrong, clicking the wrong button, it happens. And in an audit environment, you have to find all those and fix them. So that gets expensive. So automation's great, but just don't try to go so fast that we're losing things. In a holistic environment, sometimes the only way you're going to get the data you need is through automation because there's going to be too many data points. So you're going to have to figure out how you're going to make this entire environment work if you've got multiple data coming in, multiple things coming in. Where's the data that you need, and what are you trying to show with the data? And all that should be supported through manual systems and then hopefully automation. Training, when I talk training, yes, there's training, your system administrator should have training, your organization should have, but awareness training. Awareness training is the biggest bang for the buck you will ever get in cybersecurity. 92% of malware is delivered via email. According to Intel, this is 2021. 97% of users couldn't identify a sophisticated phishing email. We've installed a phishing email simulator. It sends out emails once in a while that are obviously phishes. And sometimes you can't tell they're really good. So it's practice. It's practice, training, practice. Proactive training will significantly help users learn how to avoid these cyber attacks. And nobody wants to bring something in that's going to do real bad damage. I'll give you an example. I was at a medical facility, and they got hacked on our payroll. And so I did some research on it, and they used Workday. And Workday is a place that you can go ahead and do your own assignment for insurance and things, and also you can do your own direct deposits. So the person had done a spear phish and a spear phish is a very directed phish to executives at this company, and someone had clicked back. They were able to put a key logger on their machine, which logs every keystroke you make and sends it back to someone. And they got the password for Workday. So they went into everyone's account and moved everyone's direct deposit into a refillable green dot debit card. You know, the ones you see at the grocery store? They had hundreds of those because there was hundreds of employees. And then payday came and no one had money in their bank. It had all been siphoned out to these green dot cards, which is a very, very well organized crime attack. You can see how with a little training, don't click on this. Be careful, think about it. They could have prevented that. And so they went into significant awareness training. But of all the things we talk about, the best bang for the buck will always be awareness training. Return on investment. We always talk about return on investment. And you know what we always say? We always say cybersecurity projects were designed as not as a cost savings or ROI initiative. Cybersecurity has always been considered a risk reduction initiative with benefits that were considered intangible. That sounds really good and gets us out of the whole budget thing. We don't have to care, but it also gets us out of the discussion. They're no longer talking about us or with us. So we need to get past that. We need to measure success, how accounting, how finance, how the C-suite measures success, and that's what's the value of our work. So let's say we're going to put cybersecurity into a portal, and that portal creates $10 million of revenues for the organization. If we can reduce the risk by 2%, that could be a $200,000 benefit to the business. Again, the numbers, you can work different ways, but the point is this. When you start to get management's attention in a good way, that's a very good thing. So when we talk about return on investment, yeah, there is a return on investment. Not only, we spend all this money, sure, but we reduce the risk, which really shows that we probably protected you for over $200,000 benefit for this year. And there's ways to look at it. What I've always said is go to finance. Finance and accounting, they know how they're going to accept these types of numbers, and ask to work with them and say, we want to build this algorithm. We want to build this formula that says, if we show this much in revenues and we're able to reduce risk, and you may have to be more specific on that, how can we show a benefit to the business? And I think we need to be moving away from a quality, high, medium, low, to a quantity. We need to get very specific. This is how much protection we provide you at a very low cost, relatively speaking. Or if you come up to reduce the risk and you only see a $50,000 benefit to the business and it costs you $250,000, there's probably something that you've missed, or the project wasn't probably well thought out. But that's not totally uncommon either, because you have those management has different agendas when they see the cybersecurity money and they want to use it for different things. And where we could show a better benefit, maybe that's not what one executive wants to see. So there's always trade-offs. Generally, what I say for cybersecurity is, this is not my business, this is theirs. I work for them, but I am there to help management. And so if they need me to look a little bit different direction to help because of that's how their business process works, I would be a fool not to do that. One of the things I always teach in my classes is well, I'm going to go on with that. I don't want to get too involved with that. But so ROI, we have to be careful. We have to understand exactly what they're going to accept. We can't throw large numbers out, but we should try to measure it. And we should, again, show this as revenue protection. So we have another question.
How do cybersecurity projects provide return on investment? A, cybersecurity projects are for risk reduction. No ROI is anticipated. B, ROI is only determined after an incident or breach. C, ROI is not the concern of the cybersecurity team. That is a finance responsibility. Or D, the ROI is measured by the revenue being processed, by the revenue being processed times the reduction in risk the project provides. Sorry, I butchered that one. I think we're at about 26% voted, 30%. And by the way, I was going to say that I can second that the emails are the way these hackers are getting in. I am a victim of the email scam. I'm sure we all have been at one point in our lives. So just thought I would share that with you, Eric.
It happens to everybody. But the better education we have, that's our only real stop. You can't automate stopping spam because they've done such a good job of hiding it.
They are getting really good today. It's scary.
Yeah, it is.
So, okay, so we've got a little over halfway there. We love if everybody participates. We're not grading anyone or anything at all. So go ahead and throw an answer out there if you guys could. Awesome. All right. So we have 26% say that cybersecurity projects are for risk reduction. No ROI is anticipated. 3% say ROI is only determined after an incident or breach. 3% say ROI is not the concern of the cybersecurity team. That is a finance responsibility. And 68% say the ROI is measured by the revenue being processed times the reduction in risk the project provides.
Thank you very much. Now, a lot of you said cybersecurity projects are for risk reduction, no ROI, and that's a very, very common response today. In fact, I've always used that in the past. I would try to encourage you to try to move down to D, and I'm not saying that's the perfect formula, but coming up with a formula that management can accept that shows that, hey, ROI is there. we are able to demonstrate value. Okay. So let's kind of talk about what we've discussed so far. Cybersecurity cybersecurity requires support from the top, tone at the top. Without that, you can get a long ways, but you'll not get as far as you need to go. It's difficult fighting roadblocks at every level, and without proper tone at the top, it's going to be difficult. Looking at your system holistically allows a better understanding of your risks landscape. Now, this is where you might, depending on what your business is, you might want to even go a little deeper. When we look at the system holistically, we see the whole thing as an integrated group of parts, not just individual parts. We still see the individual parts, but we also understand the integrations. The object is, what is my risk landscape today? Where are my attack surfaces? An attack surface is any point in which someone can get in. It could probably be a web portal that your company runs. It may be telephone dial-ins to certain routers that have that ability and haven't been turned off. It can be any number of a cloud attack. So you need to understand what those risk surface attacks are to understand your risk landscape. And then when you get to a certain point where you're more mature, you can start looking at threat modeling. Where are my threats coming from? Where do those threats intersect with my surface, my threat surface of where they can come in? So which areas are more prone to be attacked? So I should spend more of my money on those rather than the attack surfaces that have a very low risk. Now, it doesn't mean those low risk attack surfaces won't be used, but just the lower risk would demonstrate there's less of a chance. So understanding that lets you use your limited budget much more effectively and efficiently. We should start looking at KPIs as our friend. I've seen some really awful KPIs, and KPIs are as good as they're designed, but no better. So come up with reasonable KPIs. Find out what are our norms, and when we exceed them, how do we report that? How do we understand why these things are happening? So KPIs should give you really good guideposts. Now, I'm a fan of using a bunch of KPIs, but not reporting them up to management, but using them as my internal KPIs so I can see where we're going. And then if we come up with a really weird KPI at the corporate level, I can go back and say, well, I got to look at the data. I'm not sure that works. That gives me that inside information, which I find is really valuable. KPIs can also bog you down. They can slow you down. They can be extra work. So you've got to be able to level set that. Work closely with your risk team to demonstrate reductions in risk. That reductions in risk is how you demonstrate value. Without that, you are just at the goodwill of your financing team or your budget team at your organization. Once you start showing reductions in risk and you're able to show the business value of those specific instances of risk reduction, then they start to bring you into the conversation. They want you in the room because it's not just that person's got a risk, they're going to try to shut us down. It's, hey, this group's, they understand some risks. Let's see what it'll cost to reduce that to a more reasonable level. And the last one, I want to make sure that everyone hears this 1,000 times from me, is revenue protection. I love that term because it tells everyone what we actually do. Revenue protection is what we're there for, but we don't call it the right name. And by not calling it the right name, we're not in the club. And being in the club gets us budget. It gives us earlier visibility to processes that are being either contemplated or built, and allows us to be more a part of it. So that I kind of wanted to bring this all to you about this. I got a couple of slides here real quick this is the references. The Cyber First, it's a nonprofit organization. It's a Creative Commons attribution, non-commercial, share-alike international license. So if you want to look it up, there's some really interesting stuff there. I find it really fascinating. Just like any framework, I wouldn't take everything Cybersecurity First says as fact. I would say, I'm going to take these parts out, which map to my organization and map to the issues around the organization issues. But I wouldn't use everything out of the box. Just like if you talk, some of the other frameworks are NIST or COBIT or any of them. You take out what you can use. You take out what's valuable to your company, and you use those parts. And sometimes I've developed systems that have different type of controls from different frameworks, because certain NIST frameworks are really good for certain types of security, but they're not good for perimeter. So I have to use a different framework for that. But again, customize things for what you need. Make this look at the risk in your own organization. As easy it is to get into industry and IT security, excuse me, IT security environments, we got to bring this down and look in ours. Otherwise, we're not really giving them a lot of value. That's kind of the discussion I had today. If you've got any questions, I'd love to try to answer them now. I think if you don't remember questions now, I believe that you can send them in, and they'll send those questions to me to be responded to. But that's my presentation for today. And any questions?
Awesome. So we haven't had any questions come into our questions box, but that doesn't mean that they won't come trickling in after the presentation. So thank you so much, everybody, for attending today's webinar presented by Heffernan. We will send information by email with instructions on how to access a copy of the presentation on our website. And of course, thank you, Eric Reed, for your time and expertise today. We hope all of the attendees found today's webinar to be a valuable use of time. Please be sure to join us on April 19th for the OSHA update webinar, and have a safe day, everyone. Thank you again, Eric.
Thank you very much, and I wish everyone well. Bye-bye.